On that cool September morning, nothing foretold trouble. The Pacific Ocean lived up to its name, its surface smooth as a mirror. The sun had just begun to rise above the horizon, coloring the sky with delicate pink hues. James Warren, as usual, was preparing his equipment on the deck of the research vessel Sea Wanderer. His team of 5 experienced divers was methodically checking their gear. Chen, a marine biologist, was setting up Mike's underwater camera. Peterson, a former military diver, was checking the air tanks of Rachel, a marine ecologist. Thomas Rodriguez, a navigation specialist, was studying the current maps on his tablet. James checked the weather forecast for the 100th time. The conditions were perfect for diving. Light winds, good visibility, calm seas. The ship's captain, an old sea wolf named George McPherson, leisurely. The walkie-talkies were working, the positioning systems were functioning smoothly, and Sarah pulled out her battered observation log, ready to record data on marine life in these waters. Lions, dolphins, and of course, majestic blue whales. In 15 minutes, the first group of divers, James and Mike, plunged into the water. The temperature was slightly lower than usual, but that didn't stop the brave researchers. Visibility under the water was excellent, and the whole team was delighted with the sun's rays piercing through the water column, creating a bizarre play of light and shadow. They planned to explore a small coral reef located about a mile from shore. This reef was part of their long-term project, and Chelsea and Thomas remained on board. Sarah, watching the surface of the water through binoculars, noticed an unusual disturbance about 300 meters from the vessel. At first, she thought it was just a ripple in the water, but then she saw something move. It was a large, dark shape. She couldn't tell what it was, but she knew it wasn't a whale. She grabbed her camera and started filming. As the shape approached, it became clearer. It was an ordinary discharge of water from the whale's mouth, but something about this movement seemed strange to her. She slowly approached Captain McPherson and told him about it. The vessel began to move towards the ship. Rachel quickly took out a special hydrophone to record underwater sounds. A few minutes later, they saw a huge humpback whale whose behavior was clearly different from normal. With the smooth, graceful movements characteristic of these sea giants, the whale moved jerkily, as if something was interfering with it. Its breathing seemed to be rapid and intermittent. Sarah immediately contacted James by underwater radio, and the divers interrupted their usual work and cautiously headed to the spot where the whale was found. They understood that it was extremely dangerous to approach a potentially injured animal of this size. Meanwhile, Rachel began preparing rescue equipment on board the ship. Special knives for cutting ropes. High-power underwater lights and safety cables, Tomos. I contacted the Coast Guard to report the situation and requested support. As they approached the whale, their hearts froze. In front of them, there was a majestic creature entangled in a complex web of fishing nets, ropes, and chains. A massive anchor caught on the nets, slowly pulling the animal down. James cautiously approached the whale's head, trying to stay in its field of vision. He remembered that humpback whales have excellent lateral vision, and it was important the animal saw him coming. Mike stayed a little behind, ready to help at any moment. When their gazes met, James felt a chill run down his spine. There was not only pain in the whale's eyes, but also an obvious request for help. The animal turned its head slightly, as if trying to get a better look at the strange creature in front of it. James slowly raised his hand. Showing the whale his empty palm was an intuitive gesture that he used when working with dolphins. To his surprise, Osea was only slightly moving its fins to maintain its position in the water. After 20 minutes, a second team of divers, Sarah and Rachel, arrived at the site with additional equipment. They began methodically photographing the tangled gear to better understand the structure of this deadly trap. Thomas, while remaining on board with the captain, he coordinated the actions of the team and kept in touch with the approaching Coast Guard vessel. He began to compile a detailed report on what was happening, recording each action. The first step was to identify the most dangerous areas, which were entangled Mike as motionlessly as possible. Trying to figure out how best to free it from the nets without disturbing the whale, Rachel, who weighed about 1.5 tons, had to be detached without allowing it to sink abruptly. Rachel methodically cut the nets around the whale's pectoral fins, requiring special care, as the ropes dug especially deeply into the animal's skin. She made each incision slowly, trying not to touch the sensitive skin of the whale. Fortunately, a Coast Guard vessel soon arrived with a veterinarian, a marine mammal specialist, and an additional rescue team on board. They immediately began deploying. Special equipment was used to lift heavy objects. Veterinarian Dr. Emily Parker went underwater to assess the whale's condition. She found several deep wounds in the places where the ropes were. Fortunately, none of these wounds posed an immediate threat to the animal's life. The team had a plan of action. First, they needed to free the whale's head and groin. Then, they would sequentially release the rest of its body, leaving the work with the anchor for last. The rescuer had a specific area of responsibility. The most difficult part was removing the ropes from the whale's mouth. James, as the most experienced member of the team, took on this task. He slowly approached the whale's head, talking softly through the scuba air regulator. In the high beams of light, the whale seemed to understand James's intent. It slightly opened its mouth, allowing the man to inspect the entangled tackle inside. There were several thick ropes tied to its tongue and the gums. The whale's difficulty in eating normally was explained by the fact that the ropes were wrapped around its mouth. Removing the ropes took almost an hour, and it was a difficult task. Each successful extraction of a piece of rope brought relief to the animal. After the first stage, the team took a short break to change air tanks and rest. On the surface, they discussed their next course of action. They still had to free the main part of the whale's body and deal with the anchor. Water temperature began to rise, making work more comfortable. Sarah and Rachel continued to cut the nets around the whale. They used special knives with rounded ends to avoid accidentally injuring the animal. Each cut required extreme concentration and precision. Mike and rescuers from the Coast Guard began preparing to lift the anchor. Special inflatable devices were placed on the whale. They were supposed to help control its descent to the bottom after it was disconnected from the nets. An hour later, most of the nets had been removed from the whale's body. The wounds left after removal looked inflamed, but not critical. Dr. Parker periodically checked the animal's condition, noting that its breathing had become more even and calm. The most dramatic moment was the disconnection of the anchor. The team spent almost an hour preparing for this. Safety ropes were installed on the inflatable devices. Once secured, it was time to cut the last ropes binding the anchor to the whale. At the right moment, James gave the signal, and everyone took their positions. Mike began to slowly cut the last ropes while the others controlled the anchor's position. The whale, as if sensing the importance of the moment, remained practically motionless. When the last rope had been cut by Mike and the safety cables, the team held their breath. As the massive structure slowly disappeared into the depths of the ocean, the anchor separated, and the whale's behavior changed noticeably. For the first time in hours, it was able to move freely. Its first movements were cautious, as if it was learning to swim again. The movements became more confident and graceful. The team spent the next half hour observing the whale and recording its condition. The animal began to perform smooth circles around the rescuers, moving more freely and naturally with each circle. Its breathing returned to normal. Then, surprisingly, the whale approached James and very gently touched him with its huge body. This gesture was so gentle and delicate that it seemed almost unreal. Everything happened in just a few seconds, but that moment was forever etched in everyone's memory. Shortly after that, the whale began to perform a series of graceful figure-of-8 movements, moving with ease. Amazing speed, as if dancing in the water. He moved through the water with amazing grace, creating small swirls that resembled underwater tornadoes. Sarah managed to capture these movements on camera, realizing that such shots are very rare. The team began to gradually move away from the whale, giving it more space to move, while carefully watching the animals explore their new territory. From a distance, they observed that despite the many wounds and scratches, the general condition of the whale could be assessed as satisfactory, and most of the injuries should have already healed. Naturally, within a few weeks, the whale rose to the surface and released a powerful fountain of water from its blowhole, a discharge much stronger than usual. As if the animal was demonstrating its joy and relief, the water droplets illuminated by the setting sun created a small rainbow in the air. For the next 15 minutes, the team watched as the whale performed a series of impressive jumps. Each time, its huge body would appear above the surface of the water, and everyone on board both ships would be transfixed. Scattered for dozens of meters around, Thomas continued, "Whales usually try to leave the scene of a stressful event as quickly as possible, but this whale seemed to want to show its gratitude. After that, it slowly swam past the boat, allowing the crew members to take a good look at it in the rays of the setting sun. Rachel noticed that some of the scars on the whale's body were old. From previous encounters with fishing gear, this observation highlighted the importance of the work and the need for a more responsible attitude towards the disposal of anglers. By evening, the whale began to move away in a northern direction. Its movements were confident and purposeful. The team assumed that he was heading for rich fishing grounds where large groups of humpback whales usually gather for summer feeding at that time of year. As the sunset turned the ocean, the whale disappeared into the distance. As the team began to assemble equipment, James checked the coordinates one last time to accurately fix the location of this amazing rescue. The captain marked this point on his navigation charts. In the evening, on the way back to shore, the team analyzed the operation in detail. They analyzed each stage of the rescue, noting the most effective techniques and methods, and paid special attention to how important it was to remain calm and act methodically, despite the stressful situation. Sarah spent several hours processing the collected photos and videos. The shooting quality exceeded all expectations. Clean water and good lighting made every day a success. Mike prepared a detailed analysis of the fishing gear according to the markings. The nets and anchor determined that they belonged to a fishing vessel that sank in the area several months ago during a storm. A week after being rescued, they were still finding clues to help them identify the vessel. A research vessel was operating a few miles north when a humpback whale with distinctive scars was sighted. The whale's behavior was completely normal, and it fed and interacted with other whales. This story quickly spread throughout the professional community. Many experts noted the complexity of the team's efforts and the uniqueness of the whale's behavior, which was a testament to the success of the rescue. It was not just a successful operation, but also an amazing example of how different species can interact and understand each other in a crisis. Following the incident, the coordinates were added to the database of marine rescue organizations as a point of concern, and regular patrols were initiated to monitor the area for abandoned fishing gear. The data collected during the operation also contributed to improving rescue techniques for large marine animals, especially for humpback whales. Observations of the whale's behavior while it was working with tangled gear in its mouth were valuable. This incident became a vivid example of how professionalism, patience, and the right approach can lead to a successful resolution of even the most difficult situations in the ocean. Each team member learned something important from this experience. Although a lot of time has passed, all the participants in that rescue operation still remember with special fondness the look of the whale, a look of a rational being who is aware of what is happening and can feel gratitude towards its rescuers.